All right. As you would expect, we're going to be talking about some more coronavirus. We're free to choose medicine and free market solutions potentially on this episode of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal, and joining me, I have got Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. You heard it right, folks. VP. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing fine. I am not sick like Dwight Schrute. I have a perfect immune system, so I don't need anything like to worry about anything like that. But
Yeah,
I'm here all alone at Heartland HQ in Northern Illinois, an entire building just for me.
Yeah, Jim's got hand desanitizing stations in his office. Also joining us, we have producer extraordinaire, Andy Singer. How are you, good sir?
Hello, everyone. My hands are up. I'm excited to be a full-time guest on the show. I know you can't see me, but happy to be here.
That's right. Audio only. We have this all jerry-rigged from our homes. Jim is the only one that's in the office. And joining us from Iowa, we have Christina Herrin, director of the Free to Choose Medicine Project at Heartland. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is my first time on the show, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I was going to say that. First time. You're super pumped. The pressure is on. You got to make a good impression. Maybe you'll become a regular. Let's see.
Hopefully I pass the test.
That's right. Jim, you're the only one in the office. Getting a little weird there? Any ghosts? Seeing figments of your imagination?
I mean, no ghost sightings. Although we have the lights on this side of the building. The lights are motion activated. And so when I, go to the bathroom or get a snack or something, come back to my office after about 15 minutes, all the lights go out. And then sometimes I'm still sitting here in my office and strangely the lights come back on again.
Oh,
so I think maybe this building is haunted, or, maybe there might be an animal living here somewhere that is scurrying from place to place. I don't know. I hope it's not that. I actually prefer the ghosts in that regard. But, it's kind of like being a hermit in here. It's very strange to be in such a big building and be the only one in here. And I'm afraid that I might get too used to it, and have a hard time re-socializing with all of you guys when you get back in the office.
Yeah, so as we talked about on the last episode, we were kind of wondering when the shelter in place is going to come down in Illinois, and it came down that afternoon, pretty much right after we posted the episode. So that is why I'm working from home, and Andy is working from home. For all the feds and state police that are listening, Jim is breaking the law here to show up in the office, so expect a fine, Jim.
I can see a SWAT team coming in. If you hear lots of banging and loud noise, it's the SWAT team coming in to haul me away, I guess.
That's right. All right. Yeah. Last week was kind of a downer episode talking about the coronavirus. Anyone want to give, Jim, do you want to give where you are on a 0 to 10 worry level? Has it gone down? Has it gone up?
What was I? Was I a 3 on my worry about the virus itself, and a 7 or an 8 about the panic over the virus, or the economic impacts of the virus?
By the end of the episode, I think you were up to an 8.
I think I was up to an 8, maybe 8.5 or something. Yeah, I started getting more panicked as the podcast went on, which is not exactly inspiring confidence to the world and our listeners. But I don't know. I don't think I'm very changed. I'm starting to get a little bit more relaxed about everything. I think the economy is going to rebound. I tend to be more optimistic, like Justin Haskins, who can't be here with us on the podcast today. So I'm still a 3, maybe even 2.5 on the virus itself. And yeah, I'll put myself back down to a 7 on panic about economic impacts, or just the general panic in the United States over this thing.
Okay, Andy, you were freaking out a little bit last week. How are you feeling about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, my worry level of the virus, I'd put it a 5. I mean, people our age are at risk, not as much at risk as others, but by getting sick ourselves, we put the people that actually are at risk, in danger. So I do consider it extremely important to stay safe from the virus. And then the actual economic impacts and the panic going on just seem to be rising, in my opinion. And the economy is taking a hit that I'm not as confident that it'll fully recover as everyone else. So I put my worry level at a 8.
Oh, wow. All right. Christina, I haven't gotten your opinion on this, obviously. It's the first time being on the show. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 of how worried you are about the coronavirus?
Well, my grandma always said, I don't know if I'll do this quote correctly, but accept the things you cannot change, or change the things you can, accept the things you can't, and learn to know the difference. So I think that's really important in this. Do what we can do to stay safe and healthy. And I'm not personally worried for myself. My worry about the virus, again, is similar to you guys. It's low, But my dad was diagnosed with cancer on Monday, and my mom has a heart arrhythmia, and they're both over 65. So my worry for people like them and the actual results of the actions of governments and some of the hysteria and the measures are worrisome, and what the actual outcomes are going to cause is worrisome. So again, necessarily the virus that I'm as worried about. I am worried about people like my parents, but they've been self-isolated in rural Long Grove, Iowa for about 3 weeks now. So I think people are taking measures, and I think we will bounce back. So I think we just have to be hopeful and we'll get through it. But
all right.
If I could jump in quickly, Donald, is anyone else like me where if they have the slightest tickle in their throat, they're immediately like, oh, I must have the virus?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the entire nation is definitely paranoid. I mean, if I just feel a little tired at the end of the day, I think I'm getting coronavirus. In fact, my wife actually is convinced that she had it, and I am too. Back in January, she had a very bad flu for a few days, and so she's actually convinced that she's already gone through it. And Donald, one of the original co-hosts, I guess, or regular guest, John Noter, for our old friend, he thinks he had it as well, right?
Yeah. Not only that, but I've heard the same story from my father and mother-in-law, a friend of mine as well, and my brother, all saying the same thing. Extremely ill, late January, early February, and they chalk it up to this, as if there was like an initial round of this that already made its way through. But
so they're the lucky ones.
Who knows? Yeah. But Jim, it seems like your panic over the potential economic ramifications have gone down a little bit. Is that in part to the stimulus bill, the Relief Act that's just passed the Senate the other day?
I suppose it is. I mean, we're a libertarian think tank. We believe in smaller government, more liberty, lower taxes and less government. And this is the biggest bailout boondoggle of all time. What is it? $2 trillion. I mean, it's enormous. People are comparing it to the first, the big stimulus package that Obama passed when he was first elected. Of course, the circumstances today are a lot different. There are a lot of small businesses out there that are still going to struggle even with this package, and that is concerning. But I guess one good news is that people's 401ks, they're not in complete free fall anymore. Like it or not, government bailouts like this are good for the stock market, and so we've had a rally in this week, and so I bet the Dow Jones is up again and the S&P 500 is up again this week. So, those are good economic signs. Those are signs that people are betting on the American economy improving this year and over the long term. So that's why I'm a little less worried and a little bit more optimistic economically.
So I've got the piece from the Tax Foundation here. This is talking about the updated economic relief plan, the CARES Act, which, gosh, just leave it up to the government to come up with these terrible named plans or whatever. But it goes through some of the big points of this, and I'll link everything we talk about. I'll link in the show notes as always. But the three kind of main parts of this plan. The first one, expanded unemployment insurance for workers, including a $600 per week increase in benefits for up to 4 months, and federal funding of unemployment insurance benefits provided to those not usually eligible for unemployment insurance. $350 billion allocated for the Paycheck Protection Program, which is meant to help small businesses, which have fewer than 500 employees impacted by the pandemic and economic downturn, to basically make payroll and cover expenses from February 15th to June 30th. So that's basically to make sure people still have jobs at the end of all of this. And then the thing that's kind of getting the most headlines is the recovery rebate for individual taxpayers. The bill would provide a $1,200 refundable tax credit for individuals, $2,400 for those filing jointly, and then an additional $500 per child that a couple would have. So I guess the question to all of you is, what are you going to spend your $1,200 on? Christina, you got something planned for that $1,200?
I'm right back in my IRA since I'm young and I've got a long time horizon. I'll recoup. I'll get a lot more than $1,200 hopefully out of it in the long run. I'm just going to invest it since I'm still employed.
Boring answer from a libertarian, not to be unexpected. Jim, $1,200. You gonna spend this on booze and distillers cutlery products.
Man, see, I'm the more mature person here. I'm supposed to be thinking about my retirement, as Donnie and Isaac and Justin always like to remind me. I have half a foot in the grave already because I'm so old, and so I should be putting that right into my Roth IRA or something like that. But isn't this means tested? Isn't it only there's a threshold, right? I think was it $120,000 or $100,000, something like that.
Yeah, raising up to 99,000, I believe.
99,000. Okay. Well, I am, as everybody knows, incredibly a wealthy person. And so, I probably won't get this, but let's just say I do get
my gosh.
Yeah, I know. I'm big timing you on that, right?
The elites over here. All right, come down from your ivory tower and imagine life if you were to get these crumbs from the government. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I would actually spend it for to buy more concrete for the bunker I'm building in the backyard. So just to make sure that I'm safe, because I am now all about preparing for the apocalypse. This is just a test run, folks. It's going to get bad out there.
Okay. All right. Andy, I hope you have a much better answer than us.
The most responsible person on this podcast, I ran the numbers and I figured out what I could purchase to keep me alive for the longest period of time. Obviously, the most nutrient-dense food on the earth is candy. So the question is, how much candy can I buy with $1,200 of government money? So here's how the numbers work out. A 5-pound bag with 760 Tootsie Rolls costs $18.69. If I divide $1,200 by that, I'll get 64 bags of Tootsie Rolls. Those 64 bags times the 5 pounds will equal 320 pounds of Tootsie Rolls I'll be purchasing with my government money, times the 760 units per bag is 48,640 Tootsie Rolls. So if I spread it all on Tootsie Rolls, it's there. But I got one more, and it's
well, that's an investment. So you got some foresight there. That's good. That's good.
When we go to Jim's bunker, we're going to need food that lasts and that is nutrient dense, and that's where we get the Tootsie Rolls. But let's say we're afraid of the sugar impact, but we still want the candy. Let's bring up the sugar-free gummy bears. Okay. So if I buy a 5-pound bag with 1,000 gummy bears, that'll give me $28.95. These are all from Amazon. That'll give me 41 bags of gummy bears. The 41 bags times the 5 pounds is 205 pounds of gummy bears, which times the 1,000 gummy bears per bag is 41,000 gummy bears. But I don't know how much you know about sugar-free gummy bears, but they do not work well on the digestive system.
Oh, no.
So if you consider that 20 bears equals approximately 30 minutes in the bathroom, this equates to approximately 25 hours in the bathroom per bag for a 5-pound bag of bears. Because I'll be buying 41 bags of 5 pounds of gummy bears times 25 hours in the bathroom per bag, I will be spending 1,025 hours on the toilet, or 61,500 minutes in the bath. Now, the most successful, longest Oscar-winning Best Picture film of all time is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. And the extended cut is 252 minutes.
Oh my
so
God.
If you consider these 61,500 hours I'll be spending in the bathroom due to these gummy bears, divided by the runtime of the Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, I will be spending 244 views of Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King at 252 minutes.
Yeah, this is why we let you on the podcast for number dissection just like this. So.
Yeah, and there's a reason we have a mute button, and because Donald didn't hit the mute button, Andy just talked himself out of my bunker. I don't care how many Tootsie Rolls you bring, even if you converted those Tootsie Rolls into Reese cups, which is what I was going to make that the price of admission. Now forget it. You're not coming in. You're out there on your own. Dig your own hole in the ground and hide
All
it.
right, Andy.
244 views of Lord of the Rings.
Andy, while we move on to the next topic, I want you to run the numbers on what people will actually spend this money on. Find out how many, best case scenario, rolls of toilet paper you could buy with $1,200. So the real topics at hand that we want to get to, the real reason we have Christina on, is to talk about free to choose medicine. So free to choose medicine, and we've talked about this a number of times, so constant listeners, you already have a pretty good idea of free to choose medicine, but it's basically a way of granting access to people who are, sick or with life-threatening diseases with medicine that they don't have to wait 4 years or whatever it takes to actually get through the FDA approval process. Christina, I did an absolutely terrible job of explaining what free to choose medicine is, so feel free to do a better job of explaining it.
I thought that was a great explanation. But yeah, free to choose medicine is a policy proposal the Heartland Institute promotes, and it would expedite the current FDA drug approval process. Right now, a recent Tufts University studies shows that on average, it takes 12 years and $2.9 billion to bring a drug from lab to patients. So this drug approval process creates a free to choose medicine track that would expedite the process and cut it down maybe half time, a third of the time, and then create a market for unapproved therapies. So there's patients in disease groups like ALS, Alzheimer's, cancer, who are waiting and waiting and waiting to get for their drug of choice to get the gold stamp of approval from the FDA. And if we were able to cut down on that time and expedite the approval process, which really would mean that after phase 1 safety testing and then phase 2 efficacy testing, so when these drugs are marketed or put into clinical trials and patients are using the drugs and being the guinea pigs for these drugs, and the FDA and the biopharmaceutical companies test for efficacy, at that point we would then put a drug on a free to choose medicine track, and these drugs would be available for patients. So we would have a much larger control or group of patients to test for results, and then also patients would have access that are literally dying to try these drugs. So for patients that have exhausted all of their possibilities, and this would be their.
So this has been something that we've been talking about for a while in regards to a number of different ailments, right? So obviously the big news over the past month or so has been coronavirus. So how does free to choose medicine kind of factor into this? Can it help out? Am I just trying to jam a square peg into a round hole here?
Yeah. So again, on average, it takes 12 years and $2.9 billion to bring a drug from lab to patients. I know with COVID-19, they're saying somewhere between 12 and 18 months, they hope to see a vaccine. This is a much different time frame and timeline. I know with COVID-19, there's about 35 companies and research, groups that are looking for a race for the cure here or a vaccine. And free to choose medicine would be a possible track for something like this. I know FDA has given fast track designation to COVID-19. So I think we really just need to take into account the regulations that are being lifted and look at the comprehensive reform that free to choose medicine offers for all disease groups. So right now, COVID-19 has very, very strong societal and political pressure to find a vaccine. And there's many other groups that are waiting their turn and are still having to go through the stringent processes. I think we really just need to take into account the rationale for some of the regulations and see where this goes. So yes, I think free to choose medicine could be an option, but right now I know they did give fast track designation, and with the demand and the pressure, I do think that it'll be met by, the private sector, biopharmaceutical companies.
Yeah,
So.
Christina, I find this when I think about COVID-19 and our free to choose medicine project, where we're trying to streamline approval process for drugs and treatments, and it seems to me that the COVID-19 is not just bad for America and our economy and everybody else. It's really bad for regulators. I mean, because this is proof that a lot of that stuff that's in place to slow the process down. And early on, a couple of weeks ago, Trump had to basically, tear the bureaucracy down almost, think about it almost by hand to get them out of the way so that we could get this treatments done very quickly. And if we can do it for COVID-19 in a crisis situation, if somebody has ALS or somebody has, another ailment, to them, it's a crisis. It is to them personally. So why can't this to me is really, it was Rahm Emanuel said, never let a crisis go to waste. I think, for lack of better phrasing, I think that this is a crisis that shouldn't go to waste either, because it really proves that the bureaucracy has over decades so built up that it's in the way. And obviously it doesn't need to be that much in the way, because Trump just got it out of the way and everybody is applauding.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And you have to think about COVID-19, I guess, could potentially affect every individual American and person worldwide. So again, that pressure is so strong to find a cure or a vaccine. But for many, many disease groups like ALS that have maybe only 1 million or hundreds of thousands, which is still many, many people looking for a vaccine, they have to
kind of succumb to this FDA gold standard, which FDA has the highest safety standards, and that's great. But we also have these highest efficacy standards. So testing for efficacy, and us from this free market perspective, we think the best way to, solve for efficacy would be let the patients tell you. I think having patient access would be the best way to find or prove for efficacy. So the FDA gold standard, the FDA has the strongest, testing and the highest standards, and that's great. But if we can narrow those margins, which again, in times of crisis, during the Ebola, epidemic, during AIDS and HIV crisis, now during COVID-19, and we'll see another in the future, during these crises where there's strong societal and political pressure, you see, these really expedited approvals. So I think we just need to, take that into consideration and look at that, from a comprehensive perspective of the overall drug approval process, and we can do better. So,
well, do you think that this is going to be met with like political pushback if something like this does kind of come down the line? Because, just in the past couple of weeks where Trump is talking about how that there might be some room for this chloroquine to help deal with some of the patients that are suffering with this or whatever. And it seems like there's been total pushback with like the media suggesting that he's going to put people's lives at risk because he's endorsing this medicine that might have some harmful consequences. Like, do you think people are going to be okay with rolling back some of these measures that are in place to make sure that we have like the safest drugs possible?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think safety standards and efficacy standards, so one's testing for how safe a drug is, and then efficacy standards are more how effective a drug is. I think those are just vastly different. And I think with this respiratory virus, I know that a lot of the biopharmaceutical companies are using past information from other respiratory viruses, so MERS and SARS and other information and data that they have they're using. So I do think that some of that information and safety testing is already relevant. But I do also think that much of the risk-benefit analysis should be a patient's decision, and Free to Choose Medicine supports that. So I don't think a government bureaucrat should be determining, your risk-benefit analysis for your life for taking a potential drug that could save you. And so I do think that should fall on the patients. And I want safe drugs for people, and that's, a number one. But I do think that we need to look at the time and costs that it takes, and really what are we testing for. And after safety approval, I don't see why, especially for patients that are dying, why a drug would not be marketable. But that's why I'm a libertarian. So
sure. So I would assume that you would want this to be in place, this Free to Choose Medicine system in place, just continuous, even after this whole COVID-19 stuff happens, right? So even if some of these measures are taken into the short term, do you think that it'll be rolled back after the crisis is abated? Or I guess what's your prediction on that type of outcome?
Well, I think the regulatory or deregulation to question the rationale for all of these regulations across the board. I mean, I know, and we're going to talk about that a little later, but from truck drivers being able to drive, longer amounts of time, or even the testing we look at the beginning of this whole thing. So yeah, my answer is yes. I would love to see Free to Choose Medicine implemented right away, and not just during times of crises. But I think we look at the beginning of this and the testing for COVID-19. There's a Dr. Helen Chu in Seattle, Washington, who was doing research on the flu, and she was doing lots of testing back in January and was very concerned that this was COVID-19 and wanted to submit this to FDA, and FDA would not allow her testing because it was not FDA authorized. Her clinic or her lab was not approved by the FDA, so they wouldn't take her test results. And now, when the crisis has just escalated so quickly, all of that is out the window, and we've got the MyPillow guy making, respiratory, masks and things like that. So I think that we shouldn't wait until times of crises to question these things. And I think as libertarians, this gives us a huge voice and a huge platform to talk about regulations and what do they really mean, because we're stepping back because we have to. And I don't think we should just do it in times of crises. So I absolutely think we should, implement reforms, and we should have the least amount of restriction on innovation as we possibly can. And that'll, that's what makes us the best country in the world, or what should, I would think. But
Yeah, no doubt. So we are going to continue to talk about some things that relate to the FDA and getting rid of some of these regulations. So I do want to keep you on. I don't want you to just be on for a segment and then leave. So if you want to stay on for the rest of the episode, that'd be awesome. But in just terms of free to choose medicine, where can people go to kind of stay up to date more on this project and what you've got going on?
Sure. So you can go to freetochoosemedicine.com. And we've got all of our publications. We've got our book for purchase there. And we also have some great videos that really highlight what free to choose medicine is. And we also have this other secondary aspect I just want to mention that's part of this policy proposal called the Trade-off Evaluation Drug Database. And I think it really fits into here because this is a way that the FDA would track patient data. And I think this is really relevant to COVID-19 with so much patient data, so many different, authorities and biopharmaceutical companies working together and doing testing, that we really do need a database that would look at patient data and be able to store it and use it for future viruses and disease groups. So feel free to check that out or reach out to us on our website as well. We are happy to, connect in any way we can and collaborate.
All right, fantastic. So I also want to talk about this, and this relates perfectly to the FDA. This is an article that's from Reason Foundation. FDA should get out of the way of at-home COVID-19 testing. So it starts off, it says 4 different at-home diagnostic companies are planning to offer tests for coronavirus infection to healthcare workers and to the public over the next week or so. One of those companies is an Austin-based Everlywell, which says that it'll be able to make as many as 30,000 tests available to healthcare providers today. This was written a couple of days ago. The company aims to return results to consumers within 48 hours after the labs receive the test samples, and it says it'll offer telehealth consultation to folks who test positive. Positive results will be communicated to all mandated federal and state reporting agencies. The company says it'll also make no profits off of the $135 tests. By working with multiple labs, the company plans to ramp up testing and diagnosis capacity for 250,000 people weekly. However, the FDA administration has a different response. Quote, "We want to alert the American public that at this time, the FDA has not authorized any test that is available to purchase for testing yourself at home for COVID-19, declared an FDA Associate Commissioner for Regulatory Affairs in a March 20th press release. So, I mean, Everlywell has been around for years. They've provided testing products for a variety of different things, including genetic testing, allergies, sensitivity, etc. This is not like Uncle Tony's corona testing. Hey, sneeze on a napkin and mail it in. We'll tell you if you got the Rona in a couple weeks, So, so I mean, so on one hand, I could see the FDA is there to make sure that these fraudulent testing companies aren't giving people false info or whatever. But so I guess, Jim, I'll go to you first. Does the FDA have a point here in trying to slow roll some of these private companies and offering tests to make sure that they're safe, safe and effective and not giving false information?
Well, I would say no. I mean, because by and large, governments treat Americans like morons, like everybody's a 4-year-old and can't think for themselves. And they, so if it is called Uncle Tony's COVID-19 test, you might want to, reconsider. And frankly, there's really not a lot of harm. And, in this, the market actually will take care of it. And if you get fraudulent tests and people find out, I mean, hell, yeah. How about this? How about China? Remember, the media was applauding that China was sending all these testing kits to Italy and other countries. Like America is sitting on their hands while China is helping the world. Those tests were broken. Those tests didn't work. And so that gets reported on page, that hardly gets reported, but China gets applause from around the world for sending these tests. And so, the market will figure these things out. And in fact, the reason we were able to get so much testing done, the CDC's testing regime was what actually was broken. We weren't getting a lot of testing done. And it was the private sector that came in and figured it out. And again, it was Donald Trump who pushed regulations aside to let the private sector get in there, and private labs get in there and get COVID-19 tests. Look, this is a virus that we didn't even know existed 6 months ago, and there's this expectation that we're going to have millions of tests that are going to be giving you accurate results just like that in the snap of a finger. No. But we can do it better and faster in this country because the private sector is developing ways to test for this virus, because they have a financial incentive to do so. The government does not. And that's why the private sector has done better at this than the government has. So, yeah, I'm not, FDA actually should just get out of the way, and the private sector will figure it out. And the American people will figure it out on what's a good test and what isn't a test.
I don't see also sorry, can I jump in here, Donald?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't see what the problem is also if we allow people to take at-home tests. So, I mean, in this scenario, someone takes a test, they get a positive, and it's considered, probably accurate. Like, we don't have to factor that into the government's numbers, but I do think that it's beneficial for people to have some sort of avenue, even if imperfect, to figure out what sort of condition they're currently in. And then I could see the government, in terms of their numbers, actually having like their certified tests that they're willing to administer in controlled environments that they'll add to their actual statistics. But for people in their own homes, I think having imperfect but still better than nothing testing that will alert people to the dangers that they may pose to others is completely beneficial.
And hey, guess what? The government's testing isn't perfect either. There are false tests all the time.
Yeah, and there you go. That's why if we allow the at-home tests, we will have more people competing to create the most accurate results. And that way, we will be able to drive competition and get more accurate resulting, versus having government choose one supplier that's already proven to be imperfect.
Yeah, if the government just wants to drive down the demand for these at-home tests, I think they should just show you what you actually have to do to test yourself.
Seriously.
Have you guys seen this?
Okay, I haven't seen it, but I've heard.
Okay.
Continue to go on.
So it's like a cotton swab that's like 4 inches. No, sorry, like 10 inches long, and you have to insert it into your nose, like 6 inches deep. Like you have to basically, people are saying that it feels like you're giving yourself a lobotomy. Like you have to get it so deep in there. Like, if it was seriously just sneezing on a napkin and then just putting it in a test tube and seeing if you're sick or whatever, yeah, test me all day. I'll do 15 of those. But man, I have to be sure that I'm sick to put a cotton swab that deep into my brain to test this thing.
Yeah, it's like getting the tracker out of Arnold's head in Total Recall. That's frightening.
Good reference.
Oh, absolutely. So, but Christina, FDA, obviously, I assume that you're saying that they should step out of the way and allow some of these companies to get some of these tests onto the market and to healthcare providers.
Yeah, I saw the Everly Well test, and I think it's brilliant. I think that more private sector companies will start to come up with tests that already do testing like that's, like you said, it's not some guy in a basement somewhere who's trying to sell a test. And I think that Dr. Helen Chu out of Seattle, Washington, who's doing a research project on the flu and was unable to use that data because the FDA did not certify her, and I put that in air quotes, that could have saved us. I don't even want to, hindsight's 2020, but how many lives could that have saved us if we knew right away and we could have really isolated this back in January? I don't know how much money that could have saved us in lives. I don't know. But I do think that we should absolutely look to the experts on that. And that's going to be our doctors and our medical professionals or people that are specialists in testing really well. I mean, that's not a new thing.
Right. So moving on. So I've got a piece. This kind of ties into some of the stuff that we were talking about last week and some of the answers that Christina was talking about. This is a report, I guess, from the Americans for Tax Reform. It's a list of 109 regulations that have been waived to help fight COVID-19. So it starts off, says the Trump administration and state and local governments are wisely suspending regulations in order to help fight against COVID-19 virus. Below are a list of some of the suspended regulations. So it just continues to be just like a headline, a link, and just a small paragraph of 109 different regulations that have been wiped out to help fight against COVID-19. So some of these include FDA allows state leeway in virus testing. FDA loosens regulations on distribution of newly developed tests. I guess not loose enough, according to this Reason article we just went over. Department of Transportation provides hours of service regulatory relief to commercial vehicle drivers transporting emergency relief, allowing of licensed healthcare professionals to work in different states from which they are licensed. So this kind of goes into some of the relaxation of occupational licensing laws that we've talked about. This one's interesting. TSA allowing hand sanitizer containers up to 12 ounces. So the little like travel size ones that you had to, bring onto a plane before, that's out the door. Loosening HIPAA requirements in order to expand telemedicine. Again, this is another one we talked about pretty extensively last week, the idea of how telemedicine can kind of help out in this. And then there's some just kind of weird ones on here. So there's a lot of those. There's state-specific ones of allowing telemedicine, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's allowing distilled spirits permittees to produce hand sanitizer. So apparently, like, whoever makes Skull vodka is going to be able to start making hand sanitizer, which that'll be something that you need to collect. That'll be something to remember 2020 by. And then different states are getting rid of their plastic bag bans. So, apparently that's going to help fight against the virus. But the thing is, and I was going through this list, I wasn't struck by any single one of these being like a game changer. I was more shocked by some of these regulations were on the books in the first place. So like, here's another one. New York allows individuals with disabilities to be accompanied by staff of the opposite sex.
I read that one.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad that we're suspending that to fight COVID, but why was that even a thing in the first place? In Texas, they're now allowing alcohol and groceries to be delivered in the same truck.
That was the one I was going to highlight. Another ridiculous law.
Right. So again, similar to what we talked about last week, like hopefully all of these things that are being suspended in the wake of this crisis just stay suspended forever. Like, do we seriously have to, okay, COVID's taken care of. Now we have to segregate, groceries and alcohol on delivery trucks again. Like, come on.
If we don't segregate the groceries, COVID's coming right back.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you compiling a list of the upside of COVID-19?
Yeah.
A running list right now?
Yeah. Expanded telehealth, reduction of occupational licensing, expansion of different educational methods or whatever, and alcohol and groceries can be delivered in the same truck. Also, another really good one, we could put this in the silver lining category, is a lot of states are now allowing delivery drivers, like food delivery drivers, to deliver alcoholic drinks.
Yeah.
So that's a great sign. Let's hope they don't roll that one back. But I mean, so this just kind of goes to the idea that, the government has largely stood in the way of taking care of things that arise like COVID-19 or any type of other societal hiccups like that. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's just kind of takes a crisis to reveal how ridiculous some of this stuff is that the government's got their hands in. Jim, I'm sure you can rant about this.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, we've talked about it already, and we talked about the not letting a crisis go to waste, just with the FDA and getting out of the way and rethinking what regulations we have in place and seeing what a barrier it is to innovation and frankly our way of life and just the proper way to do things. Everything gets sclerotic over time. It gets more onerous, and large organizations go this way, but especially governments go this way. And so it's actually quite exciting in some ways to see a lot of these things just go away, because in this crisis, we have to get things done now. It's like, well, there's a lot of things we need to get done now. And there's a lot of things that we've banned doing, as you've just gone through that list, that had no business being banned. And what this is doing is it is opening up people's eyes into how either society is ordered or how government regulates their lives in ways they were really not even aware of. I mean, I'm sure it never occurred to anybody. There is absolutely zero chance any man and woman in Texas had any idea that you couldn't deliver alcohol and groceries on the same truck. And so they see that and they think, well, God, that's insane. That's dumb. And I'm glad we're doing that now. And let's just make sure that stays off the books permanently. There's when I was an editorial writer a long time ago, we used to do editorials on, we would look up at the end of the year find some really ridiculous laws that people had no idea were on the books. And it was, you do a top 10 list of laws that should be repealed in your state because these laws don't make any sense. And they're just sitting there on the books, and they have been there sometimes for more than a century. And, sometimes those laws would get repealed. But, in this emergency situation, people are very attuned to what's going on. They're very attuned to what is getting in the way of us getting over this COVID-19 crisis economically and medically. That is all to the good. And I'm, not to say it again and again, but, not letting a crisis go to waste. This crisis is not going to waste because this crisis is opening up a lot of people's eyes.
Andy, I know I took some of your favorite ones from this list. Is there any other kind of ridiculous regulations that have been gotten rid of that you saw?
I mean, mostly just the alcohol ones are all the ones that struck me the most. But it seems like the entire United States is moving closer to New Orleans, a place I spent a lot of time with curbside alcohol and delivery. So I'm a big fan of all these developments. More ridiculous ones. We've hit the crazy.
Yeah, the another one that I saw here is that tax day has been pushed back till mid-July. So everyone that's frantically trying to get their stuff together for getting your taxes in, you got a few more months, so that's pretty good. Also, I just as I'm saying this, I get a little push notification that says the House has just passed the $2 trillion COVID-19 emergency bill. So I assume Trump will be signing that probably today. I don't know. Maybe Jim's got better insight into that, but maybe we'll start seeing our COVID checks being sent to us in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I know. I mean, $2 trillion. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But I will note that it's so big, nobody really knows what's in it. And I suppose it certainly is necessary. Something had to be done. You can't, and this is really what it comes down to. You can't have a government order people to shut down their businesses, shut down their way of life, stay home, locked in their own room, and then not do anything to compensate for what you're taking away from them. So in that regard, although I am a small government, low spending kind of person, there is an argument that this is a takings issue here, that the government has taken away your liberty. They've taken away your business. They've taken away your ability to earn a living. And so you are entitled to some kind of compensation for that taking. And so, the good news is that Nancy Pelosi did not succeed in coming in here and turning it into the liberal left-wing wish list act of 2020. She was basically going to shove the Green New Deal down our throats while we're all lying in bed sick from COVID-19. It was disgusting, and I was actually shocked that she backed down. The blowback from what the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi was trying to do to this bill was so intense that they backed down. That takes a lot of doing because they are shameless about this kind of stuff. And there was great speeches, and many of our listeners may have already seen these, and they're easy enough to find on YouTube. But Ted Cruz gave a great speech on the Senate floor about what the Democrats were trying to do to this bill, and Tom Cotton gave another great speech as well. And when I saw what the Democrats were trying to do to this bill, one of the first things I thought of is like, why don't the Republicans ever do this? Why don't they ever shove into an emergency bill the abolition of the IRS, or moving tax day, or moving election day to tax day, or something? That's in the Constitution, so that's not possible. But you know what I'm saying? It's like the Democrats never lose the opportunity to try to shove their agenda down your throats on these emergency type of bills. And Ted Cruz actually said on the floor of the Senate, hey, there's a lot of stuff I would like to get done that I would like to get done now without anybody, debating it. And because I want it done, I can put it in this bill, but I'm not going to do that because I'm not a big jerk. And so, one of the things he wanted to abolish the IRS. That would be great. Put that in this bill. Why didn't we do that? Because, he was not thinking that I should exploit this unbelievable, unprecedented crisis in America to get my agenda through. And I was so depressed because I thought for sure that they were all going to cave because there's no way Trump would ever veto this. And thank goodness the pressure from America, from our listeners, from everybody was so intense that they had to back off.
Are you saying that the arts department or whatever, the Department of the Arts doesn't need additional funding, Jim? Are you some type of anti-art guy? Is that what you're saying here?
How are we going to art if we don't give them additional funding for all the programs they're going to need?
Well,
art is very important for 0.00001% of the population.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what's the number? I think it's like every American now owes is it 65,000, and we each got a check of $1,200 or something like this. This bill actually costs every American.
Well, that's what I was going to tease here. So Justin and I are going to do an episode. It's probably going to be a Stopping Socialism episode about just kind of like the exorbitant amount of debt and just like the amount of money that the Federal Reserve is pumping in, how this relates to modern monetary theory, obviously. And just the idea that, like, because of the system that we have in place, we have pushed our society into over the past several decades, into a spot where savings is bad and taking loans is good. And how that has driven us to a place where when a crisis does happen, we can't just rely on the old grain silo in case there's a drought. We have to run hat in hand to the government. It's a system that has encouraged dependence on the government, and we're going to get into that. But that's a future episode. We'll talk about that later. Andy, give us those important numbers. How much toilet paper can $1,200 buy us?
So these numbers were a little bit harder to run because the toilet paper I could find was either sold out or exuberantly expensive. But Walmart is supplying 12 packs of 1,000 sheets of single-ply Scott toilet paper rolls for $9.87. So $1,200 divided by $9.87 is 121 12 packs of toilet paper, single-ply, of course. Two-ply, not here anymore. 121 packs of these 12 rolls times 12 is 1,452 rolls of toilet paper. If you consider the 1,000 sheets per roll of toilet paper, we can, for $1,200, buy approximately 1,452,000 sheets of toilet paper, which means, Jim, once I bring my 61,500 minutes of toilet time due to my 41,000 gummy bears, we will have 1,452,000 piece of toilet paper.
All right. Well, see, that is the insight that brings people to this podcast every week. So thank you for that, Andy.
Hey, Donnie, let's keep Andy busy so that he doesn't talk anymore. Hey, Andy, why don't you calculate how many miles would that toilet paper stretch if you did it end to end? Go ahead and do that.
That's a pretty funny one.
Yeah, all right.
But that's pretty good.
Put him on mute now, Donnie. I got him. He's going to stay busy.
Still have a couple of minutes here. So we're week 2? This is the end of week 2 of our working from home and all of that. So, are you starting to get bored? Starting with Jim, are you starting to get bored? Are you finding new shows to watch? Is there anything that I should be tuning into to kind of keep myself busy over over the weekend and the next few weeks?
Yes, obviously you guys are not watching, you're not binging streaming services during the week because you're working from home and there's lots of things you're doing for us. But on the weekends, when you're not allowed to leave and you can't go anywhere and you just, you should support your local pizza place and go pick up a pizza or go to your local restaurant and get some takeout. By the way, I've been trying to do that a little bit more than normal because I want to make sure my local businesses are going to survive. But I have started watching on Netflix The Tiger King, which is hilarious. It is crazy. It's a documentary. It's a 7-part series about this guy who lives in Oklahoma, who owns a big cat park, and he calls himself the Tiger King. Actually, his name is Joe Exotic. It has been trending a little bit on Twitter. I actually saw a story about this show on The Federalist, which hit me to it. And I'm usually a little bit reluctant to watch some of these documentaries like on Netflix of people in the real world because they tend to really look down their nose at people who don't live in the big cities. And so it does have a little bit of that tone. But this story is absolutely insane. I've watched the first 6 episodes. Tonight I'm going to be watching the finale of this show. That is what I recommend people binge this weekend as they're still stuck in their homes.
So when I turn on Netflix, it's on Netflix, right? Netflix?
Yes, it's on Netflix.
I turn that on and it auto plays the trailer for it. And I was like, is this like a joke? Is this like a mockumentary?
No, it's real. It's all
really real.
And it gets so crazy. It gets so crazy. My wife and I were talking about this this morning, getting ready for work, and it was like there are so many crazy things that go on. It's like you would look at something if the character like this was in any movie or in any documentary, think that is insane. But there are things that are happening in this thing that you have to rank them. Like, the fact that there was a big cat owner who has
no
multiple,
spoilers.
who has, well, no, it's okay. But there's another big cat owner who's a character in this documentary, and he has 2 wives, and he has a little, and he's long hair, and he looks like a hippie, and he's like into, tantric yoga and all that stuff. He is only like the 15th weirdest person in this documentary. He is way down in the rankings. So get ready for a wild ride. It's good.
I'm gonna check that out. Christina, anything? What's keeping you busy during this hiatus here?
We've already watched Tiger King. I think we watched it in 2 nights, and we binge watched it hard, and it was very interesting. I think my boyfriend, I kept looking at him as he would watch it and to see what his expression was, and his jaw was just like, his mouth was opened a little, like his jaw was dropped almost like half the show, because it was just unbelievable. I mean, half the things in there, like Jim's saying, it's unbelievable. But that was pretty good. I would say for the listeners on this group, if you have not watched Wild Wild Country, you need to watch that one. We're also excited about Ozark that came out. We just watched the last 2 seasons again. So it comes out, I think, last night. So we're going to start watching that this weekend. We're excited about that. We play Scrabble too. Get the Scrabble board out.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fun.
I already got the deck of cards out, and I've got a Monopoly set in the closet that I haven't got out yet. I think those will be really that'll be like, when I pull that out, it's like you'll know that I'm already working on like the cans of food that I have saved up. Andy, what's keeping you busy? Any shows to watch?
Believe it or not, I have not watched a single minute of television since my quarantine started.
Oh.
As the intellectual of the group, as the math guy, I have more intelligent things to do than I've been listening to an excessive amount of books on tape. The Ender's Game series, so good. I'd say the first, somewhat of a children's book. The other 7 that I've read so far are not. And then I've been playing a fair bit of video games.
Yeah, that's where it is.
So that's where the TV time's going.
Yeah, bearing the lead there. Obviously playing a lot.
Yeah, I did want to keep that part hidden, so it seemed more like I somehow made it through this quarantine without watching TV. But no, I'm just doing.
I'm too good for TV. Among the books that I'm reading and the podcasts that I'm listening to,
the amount of books I'm listening to has actually decreased since the quarantine started too, which is weird, but probably me as much.
I have actually been listening to a lot of books on tape while working, but morbidly, it's The Stand by Stephen King.
You want to do a good apocalyptic disease scenario?
Yeah, exactly. And like, I will say that like a couple of times that I've been like sitting here listening, especially on like those days where I have like the sniffles or something, I'm like really freaking myself out. But so I wouldn't recommend that, but I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. All right, folks, that'll pretty much do it for the day. Anyone got any words of wisdom or jokes or anecdotes before we sign off for the episode?
Yeah, don't actually buy the 205 pounds of gummy bears.
Yeah,
it will destroy you.
Yeah, probably not a good idea. Spend that wisely. All right, audience, thank you for tuning in for this episode of the In the Tank podcast. Please join us every Friday for a new episode. If you like our show, please subscribe, rate, or review for us on iTunes. That would be greatly appreciated. You can also find us on Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, even pretty much everything nowadays. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at In the Tank Pod. You can also send us your comments, jokes, whatever questions at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, and also at Heartland Inst and heartland.org.
Christina, same question. Where can the fine people find you?
That's a good question. I can't be found, but you can be free to reach out to freetochoosemedicine.com and reach out that way.
You have a Twitter account for Free to Choose Medicine, don't you?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the name of it, Donnie. I didn't know you were going to ask me this question.
Oh, wow, totally unprepared.
Our profile, just give me a second. Our profile is @_free with the number 2 choose.
Boom.
So shoot me a message on there.
There it is. And you can find Andy hiding out in dark alleys behind salacious places. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.